Woods and Waters with your host, Bud Leavitt.
8 years ago, my program guest tonight, George Wescott Jr. of Tiverton, Rhode Island, was a part of the major story of the entire year. Now, the press covered this story, every Maine newspaper, papers throughout Boston, all over New England. George Wescott was the subject of one of the most publicized losses of an individual during a hunting season in the history of Maine, hunting in the fall of the year. Until this very night, 8 years later, George Wescott has never stood before a group to tell his side of the story. He's my program guest. George, how are you?
Good evening, Bud.
Good to see you.
Good to see you also.
Well, let's set the stage here. Give you some idea, just in case you don't remember 8 years ago. Newspapers covered this story. He was called a fraud. Well, he was called names in newspapers that were almost bordered on being the unprintable. But let me set the stage of what happened and give you some idea of why he's here tonight. 8 years later, he is a story. He's never reported to Maine people until now, and we think in the next hour you'll have an opportunity to call in and ask questions yourself. But this is one of a 6-part series that I wrote that was copyrighted by the Bangor Publishing Company of the Bangor Daily News. One part of the story. George W. Wescott Jr., a powerfully built deer hunter from Swansea, Mass., apparently never heard the chainsaw his hunting companions ran for 2 hours while waiting for him to emerge from the Maine woods last November 15. The saw whined to attract Wescott until it ran out of gas. And the hunter also apparently never heard the barrage of 11 rifle shots fired by another group of hunters that morning at 9:30. Not more than 2 miles from where his party had left their 2 pickup trucks. Sometime that Monday night around 7, a member of Wescott's hunting party, Mrs. William Esther Wallace of Greenville Junction, Maine, drove one of the 2 trucks back to Greenville to notify the families of Wescott's tardiness, stating, "George got turned around somewhere, he'll be out shortly." At 4 a.m. Tuesday, another member of the Wescott party, Hank Walker of Fairhaven, Mass., telephoned Mrs. Wallace and advised her to notify the wardens. Wescott had not come out of the woods, and a heavy, wet snow that night had left 8 inches on the ground. Later that Tuesday morning, 2 inland wardens, acting on orders from the department headquarters in Greenville, joined a search party of some 18 volunteers and made a swing through the country presumed to have found Wescott in its grips. Not a sign. Wescott's boot marks had been filled with new snow. The searchers were looking for a man accustomed to hard work. Wescott was more than a builder and owner of the Branding Iron Restaurant in Swansea, a small lounge adjoining a modestly appointed dining room. Wescott by trade had been a sheet metal worker for the last 22 years, a member of local 5ON in New Bedford, Mass., and in his lifetime has been a commercial lobster fisherman and a bull raker. Volunteers were given a hasty profile of Wescott as he was last seen at 8 a.m. November 15. Now the story goes on. The days passed and the tongues wagged. The more coffee in the pot and the longer it stayed hot, the louder and longer grew the list of rumors and lies. Some asserted that Wescott was hiding. One rumor had Wescott running off with $25,000 in cash after having bragged back home of secreting it in somewhere in the Maine woods. One other story had investigators checking the airline passenger list to determine whether or not Wescott was toning up his tan in the Bahamas, accompanied by a friend. Other rumors circulated that Wescott was playing games with the authorities to bring attention to a Swansea restaurant and lounge, which he'd sold 2 months earlier and was on the lam from mounting indebtedness. Wescott's friends were infuriated by suggestion that he was on the run because of marital problems when, in fact, he had been legally divorced in 1968. George Wescott's mother, then an 82-year-old woman with a face only Norman Rockwell could paint, took part in daily prayer services held by her church associates, members of the Baptist faith. Wescott's 2 grown daughters and son live in Rhode Island, and a second son then resided in Fort Lauderdale. The days and nights turned into 1 week, 2 weeks, and finally 3. George H. Wescott, Jr. had to be presumed dead. The sharply dropping temperatures, the frozen ground, the northeasters coming off Moosehead Lake, Thanksgiving Day, and fewer hunters remained part of the wood scene, especially the thickly wooded ridge country surrounding a whole network of ponds in the country where Wescott was last seen. The absence of hunters lessened the chances of finding Wescott's presumed frozen body beneath the gathering snow, or in the shelter of a cave or a blowdown where he might have taken refuge from the cold and the misery accompanying the long winter and the shortened daylight hours. When the deer season closed, November 27, unofficially, all hope of finding Wescott vanished. The forests were silent, void of hunter traffic, and the thunderous ring of rifle shots which so regularly rumbled over the hill and dale through the deer hunting season had ended. The conclusion seemed inescapable. George H. Wescott, Jr. had been a victim of the 1982 deer hunting season. He must be dead. Routinely, at the Charles A. Dean Hospital in Greenville, all of the details that must be taken care of in the event of an accidental death had been completed. Understandably, since Wescott had not been seen in 21 days after entering the woods at Township 8, Range 10, his fate was sealed. But Wescott was indeed very much alive. In minute detail, Wescott recounted during an exclusive interview his ordeal, the trials and tribulations of staying alive for 21 days, while helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, 100 to 150 ground searches, and scent-tracking dogs failed in their efforts to find him at a site 10 minutes driving time from Greenville and within line of sight of the beacon of the town airport. George Wescott was found as he walked out of the woods by a gentleman by the name of Roland Peterson, who worked for a telephone company. From there, we pick up the story. George, starting on that night when you went into the woods, tell us in your own words what happened.
Well, what actually happened, Bud, is on my way out, the road had ended and I missed the end of the road. And by the time I realized that that's probably what had happened because I'd done it before, I decided I'd go due west, which would bring me to one part of the road somewhere. And as I was going west, I came to Vaughan Stream, which I had known, but not in that particular spot because of the new road. Thinking that I was somewhere else, which I actually outsmarted myself, I went in the opposite direction. When I finally realized I was going the wrong way, of course by then it was late in the afternoon, I turned around and headed back due west again. I ended up behind Rum Pond. It was probably about 3:15 in the afternoon. I can remember standing on the edge of the pond with that wind howling and the snow and saying to myself, well, I need a boat, not a rifle. And I knew there was no way I was going to get around it that night, so I started to get ready to put up for the night, get a fire going and so forth. Well, it turned out I couldn't get a fire going. I had frostbite in my hands, my feet were frozen. I didn't know they were as bad as they were at the time. So I just did muscle tensions all night to keep the cold away from me. And I finally did lay down and get about an hour and a half sleep. The next morning when I got up and tried to stand up is when I realized how bad I was. My feet were gone. I got a walking stick, tried to get around the pond, and there was no way I could find any place where I could walk without falling down and water and so forth. So I headed up Rum Ridge, get up on higher ground. And of course I have told a story about coming to this clear cut about 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning, hearing a plane. I got out in the clear cut, waved my hat, the plane flew over me, expecting it to come back and tip his wings to recognize that he had seen me or something. I waited and never did come back. So I continued to get to the top of the ridge. By then it was late in the afternoon. And as I looked down towards Wilson Pond, I saw the outline of, which I knew was a camp, but didn't know whose it was at the time. Well, I thought about it, and I looked one way and cleared my eyes and looked back and saw the outline of the camp, and I said, the old saying of one bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. And the way I was hurting, I said, I'm going to the camp, to heck with that road. And that's what I did. But it took me another 2.5 days to get there.
2.5 days.
Walking along the ridge because I spent more time falling down. And seeing that I had done some time skiing, I got to the point where I'd laugh at myself and kind of what they call a controlled fall. I'd pick my spot in between the trees so I could fall, and of course dig my rifle out and get myself back up on my feet and try to stumble along, but you know, with 8-10 inches of snow and frozen feet, it's pretty tough. It's like having your feet handcuffed to one another. And eventually I spent more nights out, of course, and eventually got to where I figured this camp was, and I came down off the ridge. The reason for that was I figured if I got down on low ground around that pond, it was anything like what I had just left, that I'd never get there. And I came right down, it turned out to be Ida Harris's camp. And I broke into the camp and got wood and so forth and spent the night there. That was the Thursday morning. I spent until Sunday. Sunday morning it was quite warm. There was a thermometer out on the porch. I could see it was warm, and I said, well, I'm going to try to get out and get to the road. Well, I didn't make it. I was spending more time falling down and sliding around, and it rained, and I got soaking wet. And I decided I'd better get back to the camp, which I did. Well, I finally left again, thinking I'd get to the Scammon Road. Well, there was no way to get to that Scammon Road without going across what was ice, but it was very thin. And I sat there and thought about it long enough to make up my mind that I'd made a couple of mistakes and I wasn't about to make the third one. Because if I'd gone through the ice, that had been the end of it. So I spent the night there, covered myself up with a blanket that I'd taken from the Harris camp, got a good fire going, and dozed off and woke up in the morning covered with snow. Yeah, and I went back to the camp, but I was out of firewood. I went down by the edge of the pond looking for the wood, trying to find more firewood, and when I looked across, there was another camp. I couldn't believe my eyes. So I went back to the camp, got squared away, and spent the night there, and the next morning, I left for the other camp, which turned out to be the Higgins camp. Well, it took me just about a half an hour or so to walk to it, and probably, if I had good feet, I could have made it in 5 minutes, or maybe less. I broke into that camp. And that one had a good supply of food, had plenty of wood in the woodshed, and I spent some time there. There was a sunfish chained to a tree. I had taken a hacksaw from Harris's camp with me, cut the chain, got the boat ready, and it started to rain. Well, that ended that. Then it blew for 3 days. The fourth day, I decided, well, I'm going to put the boat, it was on a Sunday, I believe, and head for the other end of the lake. And when I went to put the boat in the water, the little bow line, which was probably 4 foot long, got out of my hands because I still didn't have real good feeling.
This was a sailfish. For a boat.
Sailfish, right. And I went after the boat, and of course got soaking wet, so I pulled the boat up, tied it up, went back into camp, spent another night, day and night. And the next morning, which was December 6th, which I believe was the Monday morning, I finally got another piece of line and tied it and got it down the shoreline a little way where I could get it broadside. Got into that little cockpit and paddled down the pond. Took me just about 2.5 hours to get to the end of the pond. And then I saw several camps and one with a dock. That's the one I tied up to. Got up on my hands and knees because I didn't dare stand up on the dock. I felt I was going to fall overboard. So I crawled on my hands and knees up to the lawn pot. There I sat down and took a rest, walked the rest of the way out to the road. I saw tire tracks in the road, and I knew that it was a traveled road, so I headed for town. But I didn't walk too far, and I heard this noise coming and turned around and could see it was a telephone truck. And sure enough, it was. A fellow by the name of Roland Peterson had been in the Doc Blanchard's camp to fix a phone and was on his way back out, stopped and took me down to the hospital. And
21 days later.
21 days later.
Let's go back over this just a little bit. Didn't you take a blanket out and write a help signal?
I took a blanket out when I was at the Harris camp, spread it out in the snow, weighted it down with some stones and stuff. I had taken some white tape that I found in a camp, started to spell the word out, help. Ran out of the tape, so I get some paper plates and sliced them up, made strips out of the white paper plates, and finished the word help. I had some blaze orange ribbon that I put on a spruce tree that was there, put my hat on the top of the spruce tree, put a mirror in the spruce tree so that the sun was reflecting off it, and hoping someone would come overhead, and, because I did hear planes every once in a while, but never did see them.
Now you could see the beacon at the airport.
Yes.
And while this search was on, didn't any of the aircraft go directly over your head at any time?
They claim they did, but I never did hear one. Nothing ever came over my head. I'd hear them taking off from the airport and hear them buzzing around in different places, but never did see them come over that lake.
And nothing came over the cabins, either cabin that you were at?
Not while I was in it. And I never heard them before I got to the cabin, other than that one plane that I saw when I got up on Rum Ridge.
Well, we have graphic pictures of your feet that have never been shown at any time. What was the feeling of your feet at that time?
There was no feeling, really. It's just that everything was locked in. My ankles wouldn't bend. It was just like walking on stumps. One thing happened is when I got into the Harris camp, of course, I couldn't get my boots off. I couldn't even, there was so much ice on my pants, I had to put them in the oven or the stove after I got a fire going to thaw them out enough and chop with my knife to try to get the ice off so I could get to my boots. At that time, I cut them off. And when I took my stockings off, of course, all the skin came with it. And that's when I realized how bad my feet really were. When I left to get to the Scammon Road, I had to tie my boots on, which was the second time I'd done that. Well, somewhere along the line, I lost my right boot. I went back to try to find it, never did find it. And that's why my right foot turned out to be worse than my left. When I did get back to the Harris camp, I found an old pair of waders that the tops were all rotted and ripped and cracked. So what I did is I cut them down to the heavy part, which was just below the knee. And luckily enough, they're a size 11, which was my size. So I used those. But the only way I could get my feet into my boots and into these new boots, so speaking, was to put plastic bags, little garbage bags, over my feet so they'd slid in. Other than that, I couldn't get my feet in them.
You lost 40 pounds in 21 days.
That was because the canned goods and what food, which was a can of luncheon meat in the Harris camp, had been there for so long that it thawed and frozen and thawed out. The labels were off. Every one that I opened up, including the luncheon meat, which had a little stripe down where the seam is, a black stripe. Everything else was all rusted broth. So I didn't dare eat it because I figured I'd get food poisoning or get sick from it. So all I had was coffee. There was 3 or 4 cookies, and I think I had 8 cups of cocoa with what cocoa was there. And that was it until I got to the Higgins camp. So for the 2 weeks that I was in that camp, I didn't have any food at all.
Judge, at any time during this odyssey, what was your feeling? Did you, you must have had some terribly low moments.
Well, my biggest thought was on getting out of there. My second thought was that I wanted to contact my family, my friends, whoever. I knew I was all right. Even though I was hurting, I knew I was all right, but I had no way of contacting anyone. And it was an awful feeling that you can't let them and say, hey, I'm all right. Don't worry about me, or here I am, come and get me. As I mentioned before about going upstairs and finding that fishing tube that the rods are kept in, an aluminum one with rubber caps on it. I took the ends off and I found some PVC fittings. I taped them and made a mouthpiece, and I'd go out on the porch and I'd blow the heck out of that thing like you would a coon horn or a bugle. You could hear that thing echo off those ridges going down that pond.
Never a response.
Nobody ever heard it. And the one person that I thought if he ever did hear it was Hank Walker, because of using coon horns, that I always had one in the truck, would hear it and know darn well it was me. Never a response.
When you ran into the telephone company truck with Roland Peterson, what did he say when he saw you?
Well, first I got to the side of the truck and opened the door. It wasn't locked. And he kind of, because I had 3 weeks growth of beard, I had a yellow rain slicker on over my jacket with the hood on.
Did you have this yellow rain slicker on outdoors when you were
No.
looking for aircraft at any time? Anything that they could distinguish you on the ground?
No, I found that in the Ida Harris camp.
Okay, go ahead.
Not Harris camp, but the Higgins camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on over my jacket when I left the Higgins camp. But I had a flashlight around my neck on a cord, and of course I had those boots on, and I had stockings on my hand for gloves because my gloves went to pot. And he kind of sat back in the corner of the truck, and he says, holy Jesus, he says, you're not the guy I think you are. You the fellow by the name of Wescott from Massachusetts that's been lost? I said, well, yeah, that's me. He said, a lot of people aren't going to believe this one. And of course, I got in the truck, and he took me right into town. I wanted him to stop so I could make phone calls, and he wouldn't do that. He said, I'll take care of all your phone calls. Took me right to Charles Dean. When I got to Charles Dean, they wouldn't believe that I was Westcott. I had to take my wallet out.
Really?
I showed them my wallet, my license, and so forth. They said, you're Westcott.
All right, the long ride back to Fall River. When did they amputate the toes?
Well, my son and a very close friend of mine came up and brought me back. I believe it was on a Thursday. I get in the hospital December 6th, which was Monday. Thursday, Doc Fittner got me all ready for the trip back. Called the hospital, talked to the doctors, because I was on medication, intravenous and so forth. They were afraid of infection. And the hospital was all set up to receive me. And when we got there, the news media had been informed, and they were waiting out in front. So they drove around the back, and they took me in the back elevator and took me right up to my room. And the doctors came in, and first they put me in whirlpools and did debridement and so forth. Then the doctors went off on the holidays over New Year's. So I had to wait until I think it was the 4th of January. It was after the holidays till the doctors came back. And I remember this Dr. Coleman, which was one of the orthopedic doctors, came in and he took a pair of tweezers, because the odor, they had charcoal under my bed and behind the curtains, trying to kill the odor because of the rotten deterioration. And he took a pair of tweezers and picked up the black flap, and there was nothing there, just bone and kind of a brown, oozy, which was rotten flesh. And he said, these toes have got to come off. Part of this foot's got to come off. And he said, not tomorrow, but tonight. But I didn't get in that night. It was the following morning that they took me down and did the amputations. And as I said, they took all the toes on the left foot, and they came back about 1.5 inches beyond the toe area, plus the toes on my right. That was the worst one.
When you saw all these letters written by newspaper readers, I'm ashamed to say, not only Maine papers, but out-of-state papers and so forth, calling you a fraud, calling you a thief, calling you every name in the book. Did that hurt?
At the time, it did. At the time, there was a little bit of animosity. I can't say that it didn't bother me, but I had to put my thoughts on to get myself back on my feet. I was 40 pounds lighter. I knew I was going down for the amputations, and it was just keeping my thoughts onto what was happening with me and not worrying about people that I can't say they're illiterates. I just say that they were people that didn't know the facts, the circumstances. They had no idea what I was going through, and it was because of a lot of negative publicity. I blame probably the first mistake that happened with the warden service is when they got a false medical report from a doctor stating that I was in very poor condition. I was a heavy smoker. I hadn't smoked in 3 years. That I was excessively overweight. Well, I was probably 5 pounds heavier than I am right now, and if you look at me, I'm not a great big blob. I was in good shape because I'd been working construction. I had the restaurant, but I wasn't working at the restaurant. I was working at a power plant. I don't know why, what happened other than they put it in a computer. And naturally, you feed the computer false readings, they're going to get whatever came out is a negative reading.
Later that summer, you made a visit back to Maine. You called on John Marsh, who was in charge of the warden department. You expressed your unhappiness with a general feeling about some of the letters that have been written and so forth, and seemingly I think what you had in the back of your head was, I want to clear my name. And didn't John Marsh suggest a polygraph test?
Well, actually what happened there, Bud, is if you remember, Marshall Burns had bought a new boat. And he had called you and told you that we were coming up with the new boat to East Grand Lake. We were going to stop in Augusta to get the registration. And when we went in, he parked near the front door, and he asked if Glenn Manuel was there, because Glenn said, next time you come to Maine, I want to talk to you. So he was asking for me if Glenn was there so that Glenn could come out and talk to me. Well, John Marsh was there and heard it. And he says, what do you want to see Glenn about? He said, well, I got a friend of mine in a truck that would like to talk to him. He says, who's that? He said, George Wescott. Now, Marshall was right there, and John turned around, walked right out, come out to the truck, introduced himself and said, I've been waiting a long time to talk to you. Can you come in? Well, I went in, and as I walked by the desk where Marshall was, I told Marshall that I was going in the office, which John Marsh had already gone through the door. I said, when you get through, you come and join us. Well, when Marshall, the door wasn't closed tight. The door was probably 3/4 closed. When Marshall pushed the door, John said, well, he doesn't have to come in here. He'll be right out. I said, no, he can come in. There's nothing that is going to be talked about or said that nobody can hear or anybody can hear it. So Marshall was sitting there, and he's a witness to it. John Marsh said to me, he says, would you object to taking a polygraph? And I told him right there and then, I said, after what I've been through, you still don't believe my story. I ought to kick you right square. He said, well, you don't have to take it. And that's when my head came to say, well, probably if I tell you I didn't take it, won't take it, that you're going to put it in the paper that I refuse to take one. I'm hiding something. I said, no, I'll take your polygraph whenever you want. Well, he wanted to know about that day, and I said, I can't do it today. We're going to East Grand. And the next morning, they came up the write-outs and picked me up by float plane. We went down to Sebago, down in Augusta, picked up John Marsh, flew from there over to Sebago. They had a four-wheel drive waiting. We got in that. We went down to Scarborough, down to the state police barracks, and that Lieutenant Johnson did the polygraph. And you've got the results of that. And,
Absolutely negative.
And
Every question.
they thought that somewhere along the line that I was deceiving them or I was hiding something, and there was no such thing. There was nothing premeditated. I had no idea this thing was going to happen to me. But the only thing I said to the ones, I'm glad it happened to me for one reason. I survived it. Some other poor soul probably wouldn't have.
Do you want to talk to this man? Read the telephone number and call in. Ask your questions if you'd like. He'll face them forthrightly, believe me. Do they still talk about it to you when the name George Wescott comes up?
Every once in a while. Just a couple of months ago, I went out to eat one night, and I was sitting in the lounge, and I was going to have some dinner, Chinese restaurant. Two fellas were talking next to me, and they'd had a few, but one thing led to another, and finally one fellow looked at me and he said, don't I know you? I said, I don't know, maybe you do. He says, where do you come from? I said, well, I used to live in Swansea. Swansea? I said, yeah, I had the restaurant up the road. As soon as I said that, he said, you're George Westcott, the guy that was lost in Maine. And he came around and stood on the other side of me, and he said to me, he says, tell me something, tell me the true story. He says, I heard that you were caught in somebody's bedroom and you jumped out the window with no clothes on.
Oh, my God. Good Lord.
I said, what is your name? He says, Arthur Messier, I believe. I said, what do you do for a living? He says, I'm a businessman, a contractor. The other guy with him, I asked him what he did, and I told him they're both two fools. That businessmen I thought were pretty smart and intelligent.
Old Town, what's your question? Hello.
Love it. I concur with you. I think it was an outlandish shame that this man had to be submitted to the Mr. Marsh. I think it's a shame that a man in Mr. Marsh's position would doubt such integrity of a man like Mr. Westcott. And I apologize myself for the state of Maine. This was a long time ago. But I concur with you, Mr. Leavitt. You, as a great outdoorsman you are, I believe Mr. Westcott went through what he did, and there was no, what's the explanation of his toes? What did Mr. Marsh have to say about that? Thank you very much.
Well, until tonight, those pictures had never been shown. Your call, where are you calling from?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Leavitt. I guess I would like to concur with the previous caller and maybe tell Mr. Westcott that possibly as a Maine native that he is owed an apology, and maybe the rest of us would have taken the search a little bit more seriously had we been known to have been in better health. But my only thing to him would be is I remember a previous incident in northern Maine where it's almost similar, where a fellow named Raymond LaJoy up in the Van Buren area.
Yes, I remember that one.
We were all told this gentleman was very ill, et cetera, and the search was a very, very nominal search, meaning very little effort was made to locate this man. And I can only say that I think we can do better. I think as outdoors people, we owe it to ourselves to look into this matter. And beyond an apology, I think we need to learn from our mistakes and organize ourselves a little bit more seriously.
Thank you. Arrington, your question.
Yes, I was calling to see if you're still going to be a hunter after this experience, or has this kind of killed your aspect of hunting?
100%.
A1. That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
I always had a little thought in my mind. I had never stayed out. I've been out in old tote roads and came out on the railroad tracks one night, 11 o'clock at night. But I always had that little thought in my mind as to whether I could handle staying in overnight. Now I know.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you got out of the woods safe too, sir.
Thank you. Hello, where are you calling from? Yes.
Hi,
Hi.
from South Portland.
South Portland.
I think it's terrible what they put that man through after what he went through. I grew up down east on Cranberry Island.
Oh, lovely place.
Oh, yes, it was beautiful. And my family was all woodsmen and all hunters, and I think it's terrible.
Do you remember the comment that was made during that period? Do you remember reading some of the mail?
In '82, I had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Maine Medical.
Oh, really?
And so I didn't get to see all of this.
Well,
But I had heard about it. But I think it's terrible what the newsman put him through.
well, thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome. And it's nice to see you. I always enjoy your shows.
Thank you very much. That's
You're
nice.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Hello, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Portland, Maine.
Yes,
Formerly
sir.
lived in Bangor.
Yes, sir.
Bud, thanks a lot for putting Mr. Westcott on. I remember reading the story in the paper in your article, and it's an amazing story, and it only adds to the enjoyment of your program to have this kind of diversity, and certainly the capabilities of Mr. Westcott and the coolness that he went through is a fine example for all of us who enjoy hunting and fishing.
Thank you very kindly.
And I've enjoyed this and have always enjoyed your show.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Hello, where are you calling from?
Hulls Cove. I'd
Hulls
like to
Cove.
ask Mr. Wescott,
Yes, sir.
what gear was he wearing, or what equipment did he have with him that he attributes his survival to in the early days there?
Excellent question.
Well, as far as clothing, I had several layers, such as a T-shirt, I had a turtleneck, I had insulated underwear, I had a flannel shirt, I had a wool jacket, I had Johnson pants with insulated underwear underneath. The one thing that I feel that did my feet in, which I'd never had the problem before, was a new pair of red ball boots. And they were brand new. I'd put them on that morning for the first time. Well, come to find out, they had been changed over. The factory had been changed over and moved into Korea. They were no longer made in this country. And when I put them on that morning, because of the new snow, I wanted boots with some new nubs on it. I couldn't put my normal layer of socks on. So I went down to 2 so that the boots fit. But they still didn't fit just right. And I think that was the real problem, that my feet got so bad, that it's cold so early.
All right, your question. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from the Bangor house.
From the Bangor house?
Yes.
Well, you couldn't be any closer.
No, really. I was formerly from Aroostook County. I have a terrible cold, so you'll have to excuse me.
We do.
My husband's the main guide, and we sat and watched this program
What's
back.
your husband's name?
What was my husband's name?
Yeah.
Wendell Austin Sr.
Oh, yes, I knew him well.
Okay. And we watched this whole procedure from the time Mr. Westcott got lost. And he sat in his chair and he said, I would not have given up until this man was found. And we never for 1 minute thought that it was fraud. Never.
Thank you, ma'am.
All righty. I've
Hello.
watched it all evening, too.
Thank you. Hello, where are you calling from?
Yes, Bud. I'm calling from Amherst, Maine.
Amherst, Maine.
And I'd just like to say I haven't seen your program for 3 weeks, and I'd like to know when Gary Levine is coming on, but I don't want to tie your time up with that. I'd really like to hear him. But I'd just like to say to George Westcott that I've never doubted your story from the minute. I've followed you from the last 8 or 9 years, and I'd just like to say that we have a mutual friend who is no longer with us, Gilbert Manchester from Rhode Island, and I met you at his funeral and talked with you a little bit. And I'd just like to say that I'm glad you're alive and great. I hope you're going to hunt again, and wonderful.
We did lose a good friend.
Yes, we did. Gilbert was a great guy. I'm right up here near his camp, and I knew his son well. And I hunting with John Roses, and I know you've been to the camp. And we're here now, and we've spoke with you recently.
All right, old friend, we got a call from Wells. Hello.
Hi, Bud.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to outrage it to the people that, would judge him, a hunter.
Yes.
And I hope he doesn't think all Maine people are like that.
He does not.
That's good. I hope he's all right, and I hope he is able to hunt again. Thank you.
Thank you. We were hoping tonight we'd get some of those people who wrote those letters, but everybody's your friend tonight, George. Where are you calling from? Hello?
Hello, Bud.
Yes, sir.
How are you this evening?
I'm fine.
Bud, this is Glenn Perkins in Greenville.
Oh, Glenn. The old warden.
I just wanted to say hi to George and let him know that still thinking of him.
Well, it's funny. I want to tell you something. We were talking about you this afternoon.
You were.
George and I, right?
I bet you were.
Tell him what we were talking about.
We're talking about that little timer for the horn.
All right.
And I still have those booties that you gave me, and I wear them when it gets cold.
Does it work?
They sure do.
Well, good. I'm glad they do.
I was awful glad that I got them.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I think there's been a couple people down to buy a pair from you since.
Well, I just wanted to say hi to you, and just one comment is that through all life's experiences, we all learned from our experiences, and that Maine Warden Service is still probably one of the very best in the nation in their results of searches. There's no question there was mistakes made on everybody's part, and we've learned from those mistakes.
Good warden right there,
We
Glenn
definitely have been very, very successful in all of our searches from them, and we continue to train and improve ourselves in our efforts with searches.
Well,
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn. Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you.
Got a call, Kittery. What do you have on your mind?
Yes, Mr. Leavitt.
Yes, sir.
I was just calling in reference to this gentleman's circumstances. Did he have any medical training? As myself, I have emergency medical training. Did he do anything for his injuries that he occurred while they were happening, protecting him, extra clothing, wrapping him up, instead of reheating him? Did he ever think about this staying in the one camp, so it wasn't, maybe he could be found at a certain time period after a while? Was there any traffic in there, like snowmobiles or anything like that?
No, these camps are 4.5 miles from the road. They're on the south side of Wilson Pond. The only two camps, they're isolated. I did take a crib sheet in the Harris camp, and I found some first aid ointment, which I put on my feet, and I ripped up the crib sheet and used it for dressings. The only thing that I had other than that was some aspirins, and every day, first thing in the morning when I get up, I'd have a drink of water and I'd take a couple of aspirins. And Dr. Perkins, not Dr. Perkins, Dr.
Don't promote Glenn here. Dr. Fickner?
Dr. Fittner said that it was probably one of the best things I did because it kept my blood thin down and kept circulation going. Which I was doing something that I really didn't realize I was doing, but it did make me feel better.
Where are you calling from? Hello?
Hi, my name's Kim Richards from Norwich Walk.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Very good. First of all, I'd like to say I'm very sorry what happened to Mr. Westcott. It's a terrible thing that's happened. I would like to know his advice that if I have a son someday, what type of advice would you give me to give him to be safer out in the woods? And the second thing I'd like to do is, Bud, could you please say hi to an elderly friend that I have? His name's Daniel Weeks. And he watches your show every Thursday. I'm a home health nurse, and I always take care of him, and he just loves to watch you. So if you could please say hi to Daniel Weeks for me.
I'll do that. Dan Weeks, listen, glad you watched the show, and you're a great old-timer, and I know certainly you're enjoying hearing George tonight. This man's a real man, and I'm sure in a home where you are, why, if we provide a little entertainment and a little pleasure, why, you make me very, very happy. All right, back to the question, George.
I think probably the best advice for the young fellows to either have someone teach them or take a course in hunter safety,
right,
gun handling and so forth. And the next thing that I would advise is that you get one of those fanny packs and you put some extra socks and extra gloves and a spare compass and some Bic lighters. Don't worry about those waterproof jobs. They're not worth a damn. I found that out. That's what I had. Couldn't get a fire started. And the main part of that is you have to have the striker. Once the striker gets wet, in bad weather, you don't have any light. Bic lighters, you can get them lit, and there's probably 2,000 lights in one lighter.
How about the old Zippo?
Well, the old Zippo, if you forget to fill it, then you...
All right.
Then you got a problem with that.
All right, your question. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Ed Stubbs in Bangor.
Yes, sir.
You know I can't line up with this. He found 2 camps, and he could find room to make fires, and he couldn't make signal fires or put out any indication. Come on, give me a break. I went through survival training in the service. This is the first thing you do if you're in trouble. And he found 2 camps, could dry out and find clothing, and he couldn't find help. Give me a break.
All I could say to you, sir, is...
That's all right. Go ahead. He hung up.
He hung up.
Go ahead. He's listening.
Well, the thing of it is there was snow on the ground, so it was kind of tough to find dry wood, and I didn't have that much of it in the Harris camp. And when I got to the Higgins camp, I had the boat. I wasn't worried about anything else. And as the warden said, I should have burnt the camp down. Well, if I'd burnt the camp down, I'd probably still be there because they didn't come in and get me.
All right, where are you calling from? Hello?
Hi, I'm calling from Robinson.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think that they should think of George as a hero, not a bad guy.
Well, George doesn't want to be known as a hero, but George told a true story, took a polygraph test, something he didn't have to do, came out negative, one of the top polygraph people that we had at the time on the Maine State Police, and I don't know what else he could have done. And I happen to have been the only news person allowed at his bedside at the hospital, and I know what he went through. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, where are you calling from?
Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Yes, Halifax. How are you?
This is Harry Wagner.
Hi, Harry.
We come down to Maine every year, and I was just watching your show. Like, your man was the 3rd caller before me. He was kind of ignorant on there.
Well,
we get them like that up here, but we have we get a lot of people lost up here, the same kind of woods you got down there.
That's right.
And they just stop you once in a while to check if you got the stuff, but they don't have a chance to check everybody. And, like, people go hunting up here, and they don't tell anybody where they're going. They don't have a clue where you're going. Like, I can walk 5 minutes from my house in the city and shoot, and hunt deer.
Sure.
So up here, we try to get the young people to say, well, if you're going over Northwest Arm, tell somebody. And that gives them a little bit of a chance anyways.
Good.
Okay, so now, I enjoy your show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then. Bye now.
Saybrook, New Hampshire, your question.
Hello.
Yes.
I have some information I think you'll find very interesting.
Thank you.
I do remember reading about this story in the paper, and I followed it very closely because I was an avid deer hunter. There was 5 of us hunted in northern Maine for about 20 years. We hunted in the Meadowamkag area.
Yes, sir.
We had very good luck hunting, and because we had good luck hunting, somebody thought that we were breaking game laws. In 1980, we were followed by 2 game wardens, and one of the game wardens that followed us and destroyed us was the game warden who destroyed this man here. He called off that search. If I read in the Boston paper what I read was true. I'm not going to mention the name because it's unimportant.
That's right.
But let me tell you something. He is an arrogant man. He destroyed my group. We've never hunted in the state of Maine since 1980. There was 5 of us hunted, and we averaged about 3 deer a year, but we hunted hard. We were out on our stands. We never loaded. We never did anything wrong. But one night coming out, he was waiting for us, and he simply destroyed us. The next morning was our last day to hunt. He invaded us on our hunt and arrested us for driving. There was 3 of us. We're all over 55 years old. And he claimed that we were driving deer. Well, he screwed up our hunt. And when he realized that nobody was driving deer, he apologized. He and his buddy then left us and shot a deer on the way out of the same road that we were going out. We have never been back to hunt in the state of Maine since. And I am going to say this to you, and I'm going to say no more. This thing that happened to Mr. Westcott, this gentleman, and I'm really stretching that point, should apologize to him because he had this man convicted. He had Mr. Westcott convicted, tried, and executed, and he said in the paper that nobody could survive as long as this man did. He also said nobody could have the luck hunting deer and bear that my group did. Well, my group have never been back to the state of Maine since. I was going to complain, and I said, the hell with it, until I saw this thing tonight. But Mr. Westcott was a victim of a very arrogant game warden in the state in northern Maine. That's why it happened. That's all I get to say.
Thank you very much.
This guy this man is vindicated. I knew that he was never the thing that they said he was, and the only guy that was making the dirty noises was the same guy that goofed us up. See you later.
You bet. Hello, where are you calling from? Yes.
Oh, hi, Bud.
Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Jim Reynolds out to Herman, Maine.
Well, wake up, Jim. You're a little slow on the comeback.
Okay, sorry
there.
about that. Listen, I'd just like to say it's good to have George back in Maine, and I wonder if he can answer two questions. I know hindsight's always 20/20, but what was the biggest mistake he thinks he made, and if he had it to do over again, what would he do different?
Well, I think the big one was that I didn't check that road out. See, when we parked our vehicles, we were only 1 4/10 miles from the end of it. That was the end of the road, no more. And usually I check a road out. Well, I didn't check it out that morning. I think that was the first mistake. The second one is when I came to Vaughan Stream, I outsmarted myself. If I'd crossed the stream and kept going, I would have eventually come to the road. And I went back the other way. I think those were the two mistakes I made. And as I said earlier, when I was trying to get to Scammon Ridge Road and I saw the water and a little bit of ice, I figured that was going to be the third one if I tried, and I didn't chose to take it.
Greenville, your question.
Yes, Bud. This is Travis Wallace. How are you doing?
Hello, Travis. How are you?
Not bad. My mother says hi.
Oh, good. I thought you were in California.
Hi, Travis and Esther.
Hi, George.
And Bill.
I'd just like to point out, I think that the warden's mistakes went beyond going by a computer that had wrong information and failing to listen to the people that knew George and planning a search. Isn't it true that there was a warden who was told to check the camps around Wilson, and including the ones that George stayed in, and this warden failed to? Secondly, who was the warden? I don't know if anyone knows, but who was the warden that flew overhead George and failed to report seeing him?
Well, Travis, I know, and it was true that he was asked to check that camp, but that's bygones be bygones, and I don't think anything would be served by mentioning him right here on television tonight. But there were some mistakes made, there's no question about it. Good to hear you, and say hello to Esther and Bill.
Okay, thank you, sir. Take care.
All right.
Good night, Travis.
Hello, Winslow. Come in.
Yeah, hi, Bud.
How are you?
Yeah, hi, Bud.
How are you?
Good. Hey, I was just wondering there, did he come out with his rifle, or did he leave it in the woods or camp, or what?
I left my rifle in the camp. And my sons, the game wardens, when they went and checked the camp, picked it up. And my sons went to the game warden station and got the rifle back.
Okay?
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Hello, where are you calling from?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm calling from Belmont, Maine.
Belmont, Maine.
Gene Murphy, to make it short, my
Yes, sir.
question is, he was within sight of the airport tower. Some people in the Greenville area must have known where those camps were. Why is it that no one ever went to those camps? Somebody go to a camp one day, go to a camp another day. That's the first thing I would have done, go to camps in different area. Why wasn't it done? I think that somebody failed right there in the Greenville area by not making trips to those camps.
Well, that's very possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Go ahead.
I can answer that. The only way you could get to those camps is either come in through the woods, as I did, which was about 4.5 miles from the road. And the only other way is to come across the pond by boat. Nobody chose to put a boat in the water and check them.
Lincoln, your question.
Hi, Bud.
Yes, sir.
This is Jeffrey Allen calling you.
Yes, Jeff.
I just want to tell you, I've guided for about 15 years now. I guided you this summer there.
That's right.
And,
Not a bad bass guide either.
Yeah. And I've guided in that country over there. And I'll tell you what, that's some hard country. And I think he did real well to survive that. And there's very few people in there where he was. And very few people hunt that deep in the woods. And, you know, I think he did real good to survive hypothermia. We all know what that is. And I think he did real well to keep his head about himself. And I think he done a real tremendous job to get himself out of there. And, you know, as far as all that other stuff, I believe him fully.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, your question.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Sullivan from Quebec Village, and I just wanted to show my appreciation for a man that can go in the woods like that and get lost and be able to get himself out as best as he did and survive.
Thank you.
I mean, people don't need to criticize him. I mean, he did a real good job going through everything that he did.
Thank you.
And I want to know if he ever thought about, had the panic feeling, which how much do you have because what he went through.
Says he never panicked once in the 21 days he was there.
Yeah, well, that's going to be very appreciated. Thank you.
You bet. Hello, we got time for one more. Greenville.
Bud.
Yes, sir.
George, how you doing? This is John Brown up here in the cabbage patch.
Little John, the old
sir.
cabbage
Good
patch.
evening, John.
How you doing, George? We got a
Good,
steak up here for you, buddy.
Attaboy.
It's good to see you.
I like 'em rare.
I know that, and I know how to cook them, too. Well, it's good to see you, George, and hurry back to Greenville, with you?
I was just up there yesterday, but I didn't see you, John.
Well,
it was a quick trip.
Uh-huh. Well, tell Bud we still got the 3rd floor on the Long Branch farm.
Yeah. Oh, that was awful. That's another story. See you later, John.
Good night, John.
Hello, where are you calling from?
Yes, calling from Gorham, Maine.
Gorham, yes, sir.
I'm a great fan of yours, Bud, and I've already appreciated your writings and everything in the Bangor Press. I'd like to ask Mr. Wescott if he had topo maps with him of the area.
No, I didn't have them with me. I had them in camp, but I didn't have them with me.
I see.
And don't forget, the day they went out, they got caught in that quick storm. Remember that storm?
Yeah.
There was a vicious storm that night, 8 inches of wet snow. All right, we got time for just one more, and we got to go say good night. Where are you calling from? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, sir, quick.
Caribou, Maine.
Caribou.
I'd like this man's honest opinion of the Maine Fish and Game Department and also the news media of Maine and the other New England states.
Make
Thank
it
you.
brief. You got 15 seconds.
Well, at this time, I'd like to not say anything. My animosity is kind of worn off. I love the state and I love the people in it. There's just a few bad ones, I guess.
Judge, I want to thank you for coming. Appreciate it. I know you've been ducking this for a long time.
But-
Old friend, you're a great man, and I saw you under the most arduous, rigorous conditions one could have been in. Next month, we'll talk baseball. The deposed manager, defrocked. Stump Merrill will be here, and we'll talk a little bit about baseball and get the old hot stove league going. Until we meet again next month, I'm Bud Leavitt, wishing you a good evening.
Happy wanderer along the mountain track. And as I go, I love to sing, my knapsack on my back. Valerie, Valdera, 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 Valerie, Valdera.